Yeah, exactly. Tax-free biscuits on the way to everyone in CRC 1 this evening. People are joining the call and they're like,
they missed all the biscuit chat.
Biscuits. What is he on about? If you want to find out more about tax-free biscuits, I'll drop Tig's Instagram in the chat below at the end of the call.
Right, I think we shall get going. Welcome back, everyone. CRC 1 just taking the biscuit now, classic. Welcome back to CRC 1 of semester 2. I hope you had a lovely Christmas. I hope you're settling back in, that exams and assignments weren't too calamitous. I know I can't say the same, but that's neither here nor there. I sent the attendance in the chat. I'm going to be putting it in every now and again as well, just for people who join in late or whatever. So we shall move on. First of all, I shall assume the minutes of the last council were read. If anyone has any questions, queries, or complaints about them, raise their hands now. Any questions, queries, complaints about the minutes? And I will put my phone on silent. I don't think we have any questions, so we shall move on a vote to accept the minutes. Please vote now. Okay, and the minutes have been accepted. Thank you very much, Joanna, again, with the lovely job on the minutes. Don't think there's ever been a question about them, which is really good. We shall move on to the officer reports. Has anyone any questions about the written officer reports from the Google Drive? Raise your hand or put it in the chat. I think that's no question, so we shall move on to Fergal for the President's update.
I am unmuted. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Class Rep Council Semester 2. I wish everyone a Happy New Year and all that good stuff. So this semester at the moment isn't looking like what we thought it would look like last semester when we were wrapping up. Due to obviously the public health guidelines, universities closed, and they're going to be revising it in our reading week in 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time. So at the moment, if you're asking for the latter half of semester 2, at the moment, there has been no inclination from the university. Will this be extended? Will it not be extended? I am having meetings with senior management like 2 times a week at the moment. So we are revising it to see exactly where we will stand after reading week. But at the moment, there hasn't been a decision made, but we will be circulating out the information once it comes in to us as well. There's a lot of kind of problems that we found out about in semester 1 and around exam times and at the latter half of semester 1 as well. And we're trying to consolidate all the kind of issues and problems that every course group found in semester 1 because it was a new learning experience for everyone. So we'll be sending around a feedback form, and we're going to ask for your help because we really needed to get as much information about your thoughts and your experience of the online learning and just the general sort of feel of the university feel from semester 1. Where the idea behind it is to get data to prove that some things needs to be changed, because when we're trying to get some different things changed within the university at the moment, some of the some things are smaller, some things are bigger. But the thing is that we need to have evidence-based data to actually get these things changed. So we're going to ask for feedback from you. We're going to be sending them out. I think Dean can talk about it later on as well. We might be brought up for an AOB, but we're also offering for the participants in it to make a little bit of incentive. We're going to give out 8 Just Eat vouchers to random people that fill out this survey as well, just to kind of get some sort of an incentive for students to do it. Because I think if we get all this information consolidated all in one place, have it organized properly to see from each faculty, each area, where the issues were in first semester, make sure it doesn't happen in semester 2. We'll circulate the information that we get around with the university and different departments within the college, because if we're all on the same page, we all realize what the problems are to be finished off quicker. Also as well, I want to kind of figure out where in the issue was is there sections of time within semester one where the issues are more felt? The assumptions are made that it's going to be the latter half of semester two or semester one, and we don't want the same things to happen in semester two as well. So the idea is that if there's a correlation that actual quality learning or anything happen, that actually slows down, and there's supposed to be synchronous lectures. You're getting non-synchronous lectures. Notes are all being put up too much at the same time. There isn't consistency throughout the full semester. We want to know about that. We don't want it to happen in semester two. So that's the idea of the feedback there. So if there's any questions, any help along that line as well, and pushing it out, it'd be really good, because we want to get as much information as we possibly can. Also, all the messages that we've received here over first semester, that's all taken on board as well. So I just wanted to plug that a little bit. Also, so for next week, we have Wellbeing Week, which is going to be very important. It's a big thing it's getting close to my heart as well, in fairness. And I want to kind of do a big push on the wellbeing of students as well next week. We're going to be putting up lots of stuff as well. So through our social medias, Dean will be talking about that. I know there's a section specifically designed or specifically for Wellbeing Week as well. And then as well about the library, I know there's going to be AOBs about the library for students that don't have good working conditions at home, or their family situation at home doesn't allow for working or doing online learning from home. So I know that's going to be rolled for an AOB later on today. So I'm going to let that happen at the end as well. So that's an update for ourselves at the moment. Willing to take any questions, willing to answer anything at AOBs after as well. So if that's okay with you, one?
That is perfect. Has anyone any questions for Fergal? Please raise your hand or put it in the chat, either or.
Yeah, happy to answer anything, but just shoot me an email either, guys.
Okay, I don't see any questions, in which case we shall move on to a vote. Vote please to accept the officer reports. Vote on your screen now. And the officer reports have been accepted. Wonderful. I am now going to invite anyone who has any AOB to raise your hand, please. Give another minute or so just in case. Okay, it doesn't appear that we have any AOB. Oh, Katie Archer, hand up. My apologies, just in at the buzzer. Just your name and course code, please.
Hi, yeah, Katie Archer. I'm on the BAJH. Just from some feedback from people, I think people wanted to know a little bit more about whether we could get some more time in the library. Like this semester, obviously, we really coming up to finishing our theses and stuff. Just some more information about the library and whether we could get maybe the hours extended or a few more like browsing liberties and stuff.
Katie, can I just get your year as well?
Oh yeah, third year.
Third, perfect. And we'll come back to that at the end.
Thank you.
No worries. Anyone else? No, cool. So one item of AOB to come back to, and I will now hand over to our first item for agreement, which is Podge Sheehan Schedule E. Podge, the floor is yours.
Hello, Happy New Year to everybody. Welcome back to DCU from wherever you are in the world. I'm just going to quickly share my screen, if that's all right, Dylan. So I'm going to give you the boot. Thank you. And just introduce Schedule E. Schedule E is basically it's the rules and regulations for the elections. I'm going to assume that people can see it. Tell me otherwise. Great, thank you. So I'll quickly go through it. I won't go through it word for word because everybody has it in their inbox, and I hope you had the opportunity to read it. I suppose compared to last year and previous years, there isn't any major fundamental changes, but there's two things that I will highlight for everybody here. What we have done is we've, alongside the Electoral Referenda Committee, which you would have elected in October, we have tidied up some of the language around it, and have kind of really focused on the 5 principles which were introduced 2 or 3 years ago, which have been very successful. So we moved away from this rule book into these 5 core principles to run a campaign, which has allowed for a really creative and innovative way for our students to be able to campaign, but also in a fair and transparent manner. So this basically, in a sentence, the ethos of how we run our elections is that all candidates must conduct themselves in a free and fair manner that reflects the principles, values, and policies of the Students' Union and university regulations. So that covers a lot of different things. I think it's important to highlight that when we moved away from, that rule book, the reason behind it is that it's impossible to provide a set of rules and regulations that would cover every potential scenario that could happen in a campaign. So we follow that ethos, and then if there is any complaints or we are investigating any conduct of how a candidate or a campaign team might run their campaign, that the returning officer, which is myself alongside the ERC, will make a judgment based on that ethos. We really want to make sure that we can have a successful, really positive and exciting and engaging elections, and we believe that this schedule actually empowers our students to be able to do that. So that's the general gist of things that, when we're talking about running for elections. So to stand as a candidate, you must be a registered DCU student, which makes sense, and supported by 20 other students. There is a change in the amount of signatures that students would have required in the past, and that came from our new constitution that we introduced last year. So in the past, you had to have, I think it was like 10% of the student population, and then you needed a certain percentage of those to be from a particular faculty, which is just putting up these barriers to running for election. Whereas what we really want to encourage is as many students to be able to run for election, and then for our students to then decide on the candidate that best matches what they care about and what they're interested in, as opposed to putting barriers to actually helping getting your message out there. So again, names will appear on the ballot papers as for the university registration, or in the case where maybe you go by a different name, that is considered, and usually that is granted on the basis that you're not, I suppose, trying to be on the ballot paper as elections, Mac elections face or something like that. But just to highlight that. And the same that if there is any infringements, that we follow this kind of 3 step process, is that we could warn the candidate, or we could issue a campaigning ban, or in extreme circumstances, which we hopefully never ever have to do, is to disqualify a candidate. And so the 5 principles that we operate on is that students must be free to cast their vote without undue influence or pressure. You must obey the law, union and university policies, including any COVID-19 policies that may be in place from time to time. As well, treat others as you wish to be treated. So that includes other campaign teams, it includes other students, and it includes staff of the university. As well, you must campaign within the allocated budget, which is only fair, and then you run your campaign with fairness and equality. There are guidance notes as some sort of examples of what they might be. So, for example, you can't stand over a student and point to them how to vote, and point or put one next to my name. But again, those are the core principles that if you run a campaign on that ethos, you can't go wrong. As well, there's some details just on campaigns, which they haven't fundamentally changed. Everything is there as it normally is. Say that, for example, only DCU students can campaign on your behalf. This is actually incorrect. I'm just spotting that now. I think I sent the wrong. This is actually says that clubs and societies. I'll find out the correct wording of it. That was a previous version. I'll come back to that just in 2 minutes, and I'll just run through it then. It hasn't changed from last year, so that clubs and society cannot endorse another candidate. We had a discussion around this, as it has come up in the past, as to whether a club or society can or should be in a position to be able to endorse it. Whereas what we have found is that it's best that if club or society doesn't endorse a candidate, but that they are free to promote the elections, and that what we're going to do this year is we're going to provide all clubs and societies an actual information pack about candidates that are running for election, and some tools, that maybe like posters or social media posts, that if a club or society would like to share information on the election, we'll be able to do that. So that wording there is not correct. It is that club or society cannot endorse a particular one candidate over another. Then your finances, the difference between last year and this year is that the budget has been reduced by €50. We anticipate that candidates will probably spend less than they would typically if they're running a predominantly physical campaign, whereas we think this year it's going to be predominantly online. It still allows for candidates to be able to run exciting elections and not be bound too much by a budget, but ensures that it is fair across the board. Again, we're going to keep moving forward with the reimbursement of campaign expenses, so up to €150 for the case of sabbatical officers and €75 for the case of part-time positions, again, so that we don't have elections that are only open to those who maybe have extra money in their pocket, and we're quite conscious of that. Again, and we talk about this at our election campaign sessions and information sessions, is that to run a really, really good campaign, you don't need to have a lot of money, and that's really important for us to highlight. As well, any sort of complaints that they must be submitted, which is normally what we would do, is within 24 hours of the alleged incident or prior to the close of the actual results. We will have this year is an online complaints form, which will make it very easy for somebody to give details on what they perceive might be an alleged infringement. In the past, it has usually been in writing or by calling up to the Students' Union office, but this year we were going to put that online, so it makes it very simple. And then you'll be asked about, the name of a particular campaign, the details of the incident, any evidence that you might have, and details of which of the rules have been breached and what impact that they have had, and details of what action may be required. You'll see that in the next coming weeks, but I think it just makes it a lot more accessible for students to raise any issue, particularly if the student is being harassed by a particular candidate or not. It rarely has ever come up, but we want to make sure that feature is available there. And then looking at the key dates, which I can't even read that because it's so far away. Give me 2 seconds. So looking at the key dates, what we have done here is that key dates for all SU elections will be set and published prior to the start of campaigning. So the difference between this schedule and your typical Schedule E is usually it would expire at the end of the academic year. The problem with that is what we experienced was this year is that we had 2 vacant exec positions, but we couldn't start an election campaign for them until Class Rep Council met, which couldn't meet until we had elected all class reps. So we found that we were electing, say, the clubs officer, societies officer, and science and health faculty rep well into semester, which is obviously not an ideal case when it comes to student representation. So what we were proposing here is that this Schedule E will stand until a new Schedule E is proposed, which will be at the first Class Rep Council next year, but that this rule book will apply if we are in a position where we have to run elections again in semester 1. So it means that on day 1 of semester 1, we can launch an election campaign and get any vacant positions filled as soon as is possible, as opposed to waiting well into the semester. And we think that that's a really positive thing. Ideally, we would like to see enough of you run for election that we're not in a position where we have any vacant positions, but just in case, as that insurance is there. So with the actual dates that we're proposing is that nominations would open on the 9th of February, they would close on the 24th of February, campaigning would begin on the 15th of March, and the polling days would be 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Wednesday the 24th to the 25th of March. That's broadly in line with last year in terms of the time of the polling days. It used to be 3 days long, we reduced it to 2 days, and we found that it didn't actually have any impact at all because the majority of votes come in the first 24 hours. And in fact, last year we had a higher voter turnout over the 2 days than we would have had over the 3 days. And that is the bulk of it. I suppose they are slightly later in the year than typically would be. So they are 2 weeks later than what they would have been in the calendar. The rationale behind that was with I suppose a large amount of optimism around the whole idea of having some on-campus activity and atmosphere on campus. That is more unlikely now than likely. However, we'll never say never. But also there was a belief that if we were to run elections now, this early in the year, that in the middle of a level 5 restriction, some of us are only trying to get by from week to week and day to day, and we can barely plan what we're having for dinner this evening. So to start thinking about what your next steps are as a student or as a student leader can be a little bit difficult at this time of year. So we believe that when we move further through this semester and when things are hopefully looking a bit more brighter and optimistic for all of us, that you'll have that space to facilitate thinking about your next steps and thinking about the future of DCU Students' Union. But that is the crux of Well, that is Schedule E. I'm going to stop sharing very quickly, and I'm going to root out the other wording just of the clubs and societies piece. But if anybody has any questions or anything, please let me know.
Thank you, Podge. I have a raised hand from Tig Jenkins. Tig, name and course code, please.
Oh yeah, Tig Jenkins, BAJP 3. Just immediately, I'm going to propose that we remove the section that says names will appear on ballot papers as per university registration. I understand that that is immediately followed by, in cases where a shorter form or alternative is useful, dispensation may be granted at the RO's discretion. My concern immediately is trans students. Trans students should not have to out ourselves to the returning officer under any circumstances in order to use the name that we use. And then you have basics like fathers. I don't think you can get them in the SU registration system. And if someone wants to run with their name spelled with a father, they should absolutely be able. Completely understand the logic behind it being, you might get someone who tries to register with a phony name or something like that. But just personally, I would say straight up, the chance that someone might run with a name like Votey McVoteface is just not worth the comfort of trans students under any circumstances. So I will propose, and I don't know, sorry, Owen, what the number of that is.
I shall
take the motion.
It's not a procedural motion, you just propose an amendment.
Oh, well, then that. Let's do that.
So what exactly would you like to amend? I'd like to
just remove the entire section where it says names will appear on ballot papers finishing at dispensation may be granted at the RO's discretion. Podge, sure, you know yourself, if you think that could be changed so there was no kind of caveat there and more just a clause to say that the RO retains the discretion or something like that. I just having to kind of give a name first and then fix it afterwards just really doesn't sit right with me. But obviously, I'm sure that you want to retain control over that.
To be honest with you, I makes sense. I don't see any issue with that. I think it's what I'd like to see is that whatever name somebody goes by, that is what name is used on the ballot paper. That to me is the logical thing and the right thing. It's so that somebody doesn't come along with something that isn't their name.
Absolutely.
And that's. But do you know what? Like, to be honest with you, I would say that to push forward with like removing that section and not replacing it with something. And that as when people are filling out the actual putting themselves forward for election, they are asked their first name and their last name. And if it's a case that it comes out that isn't an actual name, then it becomes an issue. But I couldn't imagine, it's not going to be a widespread issue, to be honest.
It's quite a niche thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'd be inclined to not get caught up in the actual nitty gritty of it and actually remove it.
Grand.
So, Tig, what's your proposal?
To scrap that bit entirely.
To scrap that bit. So, just quickly, I'm going to share my screen really quickly just to show what we're planning on getting rid of, essentially. So, the proposed amendment is to completely remove, it won't let me highlight it now, this section here. Names will appear as per university registration, blah, 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 as far as returning officer's discretion. So, the proposal is to just completely remove that section from Schedule E. So we shall hold a vote on, and you're voting on the amendment to Schedule E. So vote yes if you want that section to be removed, essentially. Perfect. That amendment has carried. So that section shall be removed from Schedule E. Thank you very much, Tig.
Thanks very much.
Has anyone else any questions or queries regarding Schedule E? Dean has his hand up. I'm asking you to unmute now.
Thank you. So I've got 2 points on Schedule E that I think we could consider an amendment to. So I'll do them like one by one. So on the first one is focusing on the inclusivity and the accessibility of running an election campaign. So in particular, I'm concerned about vulnerable students and students with disabilities who may not be able to participate in any sort of in-person campaigning if that becomes possible later down the line. So, you know, if you have like a student who's immunocompromised, or if you have a student who, for whatever reason, wouldn't be able to come to campus, but another student who doesn't have that condition, provided the situation with COVID may be different by the time we get to the election season, that they would be able to, I think that would lead to like an inequality in an ability to run for that election. And when we know that, say, for example, there's the new position for Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion, I think it would be really good if we committed very explicitly in Schedule E that campaigning would be online for this year. I understand that more than likely that will be the case anyway, as it said in Schedule E, that we should follow the university policy. And if the university policy is that no one's on campus, then no one will be on campus. But, you know, there's those cases where maybe someone would be living in campus res, and that person would be able to campaign in person with other people living in campus res, or it might, in some way, people might come to campus to catch the 5 or 10 people or the 20 or 30 people that are having lectures, if those are happening by then. And so on that concern, I think we should kind of very specifically say in Schedule E that elections for this year are entirely online. So that's my first bit. I don't know, Podge, if you want to.
Podge, do you want to?
Yeah, I suppose, and I appreciate that sentiment, Dean. And I think it is certainly something worth considering. The problem I would foresee with that is that if the ERC, if we start putting stipulations about the actual format of the campaign, I think I think could have an impact in terms of setting precedent moving forward when we run into, I suppose, issues like that. Or if we do ever have a vulnerable candidate who might be running in a campaign that may be vulnerable or may have a disability that is completely unrelated to COVID-19, I think we could run into some sort of issues then around if somebody, say, for example, and it might have issues using IT or running a campaign that is entirely online. I think it can get a little bit tricky because we don't want to prescribe too much in terms of how somebody would run a campaign, that if somebody decides to run an entirely in-person campaign, and so and I'm not talking just in relation to the pandemic, I'm talking in general, or somebody moves completely online, I think that is totally fair. As some students don't like running a campaign in particular, they don't really like putting up social media profiles, and that is totally fine. But I think to be able to put that at the discretion of the candidate. Now, at the same time, and this is where it comes to, is there is this stipulation in Schedule E that as COVID-19 guidelines come along, these rules might change and the ERC might change them. And at no point will we, as the ERC, be putting another student in any sort of unsafe position. We could be actually facing a potential where we could be turning around a week before elections and saying, guys, it is all online campaigning because cases are quite high, or that we don't deem it to be safe to be doing any sort of canvassing on campus. Again, that isn't guidance that I suppose that I or the ERC be making. That would be something that would be coming direct from health and safety, that they say we don't believe that it is safe for students to be campaigning on campus. And in that case, we would change that and say it's not safe. So I think I'm all for something like that. I really, really like the idea of making sure that obviously that it is fair, but I'm also conscious that we provide discretion to candidates to be able to choose how that is. But again, it comes to the stipulation that we are going to be looking at a predominantly online campaign, and it could be a case where there might be no on-campus activity at all, and that is something that the ERC then, with guidance from, say, health and safety, and say, look, there is no campaigning on campus, because we run into the difficulty that if you have a campaign stand, we can't have a group of students going around it, so it wouldn't be safe to do that. And that's why that stipulation in Schedule E is there, to say that these rules could change. The spirit of them won't change, but the specifics of them will for cases like that.
Yeah, I can understand that there's of course, you don't want to set a precedent so that by the time we do return to a normal year, that people could, say, use that to kind of impact the variety of how a campaign could be run. But I think the advantage that would come from stipulating now that campaigning is entirely online would be that students who otherwise, because let's say if they're living in Cork and they know that they wouldn't be able to travel to campus if in-person campaigning is allowed, if they think it could be allowed, and that might disincentivize that student from even going towards for nomination. So say, for example, there's a student who is living in Mayo who is thinking about running for the Students' Union, but knows under COVID-19 level 5 that people who live within 5 kilometers of the university could campaign in person. There's that inequality there of access to students, where someone who's living in Dublin near the university would be able to campaign in a way that someone living in Mayo couldn't. And so I think it just sets a fairness and equality from the outset if we just committed to online campaigning now rather than seeing what it could be down the line, because that doesn't really account for things like travel restrictions by then, I don't think.
Dean, the schedule does account for that, because it says that you must obey, say, law, union, university policies, and it says including COVID-19 policies. And then we've that principle that says that, you know, that you must run a campaign with fairness to equality. So if I'm down in Kerry and you're next to DCU and you're able to go into DCU, but I can't, then that would be a breach of the rules, because you have a distinct advantage over me, and that is accounted for in the Schedule E.
I suppose so. Yeah, I guess I hadn't considered that. Okay. I think that's that one kind of taken care of, unless anyone.
I think were you going to weigh in? Oh, sorry, Balch, go on.
Sorry, no. I think it's a really great point to highlight, and I think it is important that we recognise that. And I think that there is a lot of unprecedented things that are going in, if you've learned anything from all of this. But I think it is really important to highlight that, especially when it comes to like travel restrictions and everything, and that we need to look at the elections beyond just, I suppose, what might impact us as members of DCU, but actually saying, okay, hang on, broader society. And I think even like as when we're thinking about planning the actual campaign and facilitating what hustings might look like, we'll be taking into considerations that someone could have a rubbish internet connection. So we can't, necessarily just force someone to say, okay, right, you're going to do a 3-minute speech, even though you have internet connections and you keep freezing. And it's really important to us that we recognize all of that.
Perhaps I apologize, because I know I have another point and I've been talking for a while, so I apologize, everyone. Perhaps in the nomination form, it could be stated that on-campus campaigning would only be allowed if all types of people would be able to do that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in the schedule, because it's covered by what you had said, but it's clarified to people who are considering about running that if they're immunocompromised or if they're living in another county, and that would give someone else an advantage, so that wouldn't play out or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what, as well, what we'll do, Dean, is that, as you know, that everybody who puts themselves forward for election has to attend a mandatory briefing with the returning officer and the ERC. But within that, what we'll do is I'll do up a guide of those 5 principles, and I'll give a sample of examples of where they kick in and what you can and can't do. So it helps to, it's not going to cover everything, but it helps to guide, and I'll put a particular, I suppose, COVID-19 lens on that, so that candidates who are going forward for election have an understanding of what is within reason and what is not. If that might be helpful, I think it could be.
Cool. I guess I'll own if I'm allowed to continue on with
I'll just go to Chloe first, because she had her hand up, just in case it's related to this. Chloe, you're able to unmute yourself now.
Thanks. It is related, but it's kind of mean that. But I just wanted to say that a lot of what you were saying, guys, is really dependent on cases and stuff. And if we are talking about the vulnerable students, even if there's 10 cases, that student still won't be in a position to come to campus. Even if there's 5 cases, that student probably can't take that risk. Just to note that I don't really think that the cases matter all that much. COVID's not going to be gone by March, unfortunately. Just wanted to add that. Thanks.
Thanks, Chloe. I suppose I'll go back to Dean now for point number 2. Dean.
Yes. So this is in referencing the amount of nominations that the candidates need and required to run. So Podge, I know that you discussed that we want to kind of remove as many barriers as possible for people participating, especially when we're going to be looking at something like predominantly online campaigning and things like that. I do think that having the number of nominations down to 20 people actually puts potential candidates at a disadvantage, and I'll explain why I think that. When you're running for the Students' Union, when you get into that like heavy campaigning week, a lot of that week is approaching a bunch of people that you've never met before, people that you otherwise would not go up to in terms of like your friend group, and it's a lot of kind of putting yourself out there and approaching strangers and so on. Prior, how the nominations would work, when we'd need, I think it's 167 or something like that is what we needed last year. You have to kind of force yourself to do a bit of that to get your nominations, because most people don't know 167 or whatever the number was people in their immediate friend group. And so that nomination period gives candidates a taster of what the eventual campaigning would look like. And I think if we reduce the nomination number down to something as low as 20, that you'll have certain candidates who will be able to kind of just message into the course group chat, get 20 nominations, but don't have any sort of experience with the nitty-gritty of actual campaigning. And I think it could lead to a bunch of people running, not kind of understanding the undertaking that they're putting themselves forward for, and then they kind of encounter this huge shock when it comes to real campaigning during that week. So on that, I think it would be more beneficial for the candidates to kind of return back to what the nomination procedure was in the prior year. And I'm saying that based on my own experience running for election, that nomination period where you're doing your little bits of approaching people that you don't know or messaging people you don't know, and really kind of gets you in the mindset for running that election. And as well, I think that amount of nominations is a bit of a quality control as well. It ensures that the people who are running are quite serious and really want this role, not just that they kind of went, that would be a bit funny if I nominated myself for that, you know. So if I could, I'd like to propose an amendment to change the nomination number to the prior year's number. I don't know that number off the top of my head, but I'm sure we have that on record. I think it's 167 for sabbatical positions, and then another number for non-spats.
Podge, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I suppose so the figures, it's 10% for sabbatical positions, and I think it's like 1% for part-time positions, and then there's a percentage of those that need to be students from a particular faculty. And look at, absolutely, those students do go out and talk to, say, 164 students to gather up your signatures, are out there talking a little bit more, and it does help you. In terms of actually assisting our students in running campaigns, we will be providing training. We will be doing a bit more training than normal, and so we will be looking at online campaigning. We'll be looking at even things like, you know, how to use certain social media, because you might not be on all of them. We'll be looking at how to edit videos and a bit of viral videos, because we expect that to be a component of it. So there is going to be a lot of hands-on training that we will be providing students, so that they don't get a fright on day one and say, I meant to run an online campaign. Now, the thing that has come up is that if we were to ask students for 10% of signatures, and they need to be each from a different faculty, if I'm sitting at home and I'm studying online, I wouldn't be, and I'm in, say, a first year class, and I've maybe a class of 9 other pupils. Where would I begin to find a way to reach out to those other students? Because you can't use email lists, and so you need access to some sort of network to be able to gather up all of those different signatures. I'm not sure off the top of my head how to go about doing that. And I think that's when it becomes a little bit restrictive for a candidate to say, okay, hang on, I need to go find, you know, 5 students from the Institute of Education. I need to go 5 students from over here. And when you're at home and online, I think it's a little bit harder. Whereas typically you would have been able to get a nomination form. You could scoot down to the St. Patrick's campus and start talking to a bunch of students there and actually get the signatures. So I think it'd be quite difficult to do that this year. The other part that I will raise, because you did make a valid point, is that around actually talking to students. So in the actual campaigning section of Schedule E, which I don't know what page number it is, I think it's page 5, it does highlight that while you can't come out and campaign early, so you can't put out a Facebook page saying, you know, vote for me for president or whatever, or communications, candidates can announce that they're planning on running for election. So you can say, listen, I'm planning on running for president, and you're also free to go gather feedback from students. So the creative and savvy students our candidates who are serious about running for election will go and find 170 students to talk to, regardless of whether they needed on a nomination form or not, because obviously they want to make sure that their manifesto plans are the best manifesto plans and are reflective of that, of what students are looking for. And that you are free to do that. And you absolutely, as a candidate, should be researching, okay, what are the things that are impacting students? And the only way to do that is by talking to students. So while we're saying all we are asking for is a minimum of 20 students, we would encourage you to make sure that you talk to as many students as possible to inform your campaign idea without you turning around and saying, this is what I'm running for. And that's the logic behind the 20 signatures as opposed to the 164, because we don't want it to be too restrictive. And ultimately, we want our students to be the ones who decide whether somebody should be their student officer, as opposed to us deciding based on our rule or regulation.
Thanks, Podge. And Dean, back to you if you want to comment.
Yeah, I suppose, I guess from my perspective, and maybe this is colored because I've gone through the campaigning process, and maybe for me it just came easier, or something, I'm not sure. But I think when students are faced with running for election, the reality is that you're going to need to try to encourage around 1,000, if not more, people to vote for you. And when you're faced with that prospect, if you kind of begin on that journey with only the experience of getting the people that you know, and again, like I was saying, that would be the 20 people, I think it really does set you up to be overwhelmed by the process when you get into it. And again as well, I think that it may occur that you have a number of candidates who are put forward for the position, not because they have like an extreme desire to do it, but because maybe their friends pull together 20 nominations and put them forward for it as a bit of a laugh. And you kind of don't have that level of quality. You don't have that quality control built in with something as low as 20, in my opinion. So I guess that's my...
The ERC is not in the business of vetting candidates in terms of the quality of what they'd be like as a candidate, and that is something that we really believe that the students should be making that decision. I suppose ours is to make sure that the student that their nomination is valid. So when you talk about that, what we do is that we do spot checks, but we do spot checks on the actual nominations. So we pull out a handful of nominations and we get in touch and we say, hey, listen, Podge, you've said that you're willing to nominate Dean as this particular candidate, and we also make sure that obviously our candidates are legitimate candidates. So that hasn't been an issue for us before in terms of the quality control.
Just in the interest of time, I'm going to ask Dean if you can just make a proposal if you're going to propose an amendment, or if not, we can move on.
Yeah, I think we can go forward and propose an amendment to amend the number of nominations to the level of the year prior. And I mean, I've kind of presented my position. So if folks at CRC don't agree, well then we'll see what the vote is.
Okay, and Podge, I'll ask you to speak against the amendment, I suppose.
I would say to speak against it, because we're very conscious that we don't put additional restrictions onto students running for election. What we want is students to campaign and tell other students that, hey, listen, you should vote for me because I'm a really good candidate, as opposed to the returning officer or the electoral referendum committee making that decision on behalf of students.
Okay, thanks, Podge. And I will ask, you are going to have a poll pop up on your screen now in a minute. You're going to vote on... Yeah, I'll feel on for a second. So while Podge is typing away, you're going to vote on the amendment. The amendment proposed is that we amend Schedule E with regards to the amount of nominations required to run for office to bring it in line with previous years. Is that roughly the idea, Dean?
Yeah, with last year's regulations, yes.
Okay, so to bring it to be the same as last year's regulations. Podge is still typing.
Yeah, I'm almost there.
Okay, once Podge is ready, the poll will pop up on your screen and you're voting whether to accept or reject the amendment to Schedule E.
You can probably hear me banging on the keyboard as well, which is not fun for anybody. Okay.
Now, you'll be voting now in a second. The joys of online, rather than just raising hands.
It's a modern world though, isn't it?
Now, vote on your screen. Okay, that amendment has unfortunately not been passed. Okay, so we shall move on. Schedule E is, we're now discussing Schedule E as amended. Lucian, I see your hand. We're now discussing Schedule E as amended before with the names part, but not with Dean's proposed amendment. I shall move to Lucian because he has had his hand up for about 16 years. Lucian, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. So something that I was concerned about and something I wanted to get sort of a precedent set for this year was election posters. So having gone through the election process last year and the year before as someone's campaign manager, the amount of posters I've printed and had lying around and had to put in a recycling bin is extraordinary. And I really thought this year would provide us with an excellent opportunity to set a precedent of moving away from physical printed posters and towards a more a focus on online campaigning and a focus on campaigning face-to-face and not wasting paper, and also printing on cheap paper from online printing websites, which is very often plastic coated, non-recyclable. I know myself, I have a massive box of posters still in my room that I have to get rid of since last March, and it's driving me nuts. So in lieu of, let's say, a total ban on posters, I know that the Schedule E is obviously leaving some scope for will things be in person, will things be online. So there's nothing specific addressing posters, because if everything's online, that pretty much eliminates any chance that there'll be posters. But I do think the fact that we're going to probably be doing things online this year does provide a great opportunity to set a precedent for not having many posters, and that hopefully in 2022 elections that can be reduced or even phased out entirely, and that come 3 or 4 years from now we won't be printing a ton of posters anymore, because I think it's crazy. Around campuses we have these fantastic digital displays. There's one in Java, there's a few in the U, and they're really great, and they're a great space for people to be able to physically campaign with a poster or with your manifesto that isn't paper. So I would like to put a cap on the number of posters that a candidate is allowed to print should there be campaigning in person. I'm aware that this is unlikely to happen, but I would like it to be put in here to set a precedent for next year. And I would propose that a good cap would either be 50 posters per candidate or a certain number per campus, if anyone has any suggestions. Otherwise, my suggestion would be 50 per campus.
Podge?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. The more we can move to a more sustainable election, the better. And if we could get rid of stickers, it'd be even better, because they last forever. But what I think, Lucian, is, and please tell me if you think it's too restrictive, I'd be inclined to say that each candidate can have one poster per notice board, so per valid notice board. So say in the U building that, you know, everybody has a poster each, and everybody has a poster each in notice boards in the building, which would mean that each candidate, that it should have enough space so that candidates aren't overpopulating notice boards, and it should have enough space to put out your, you know, particular poster for you, and that everybody should have fair game, and it's one poster, which shouldn't even be, it shouldn't be 50 at all, really, to be honest with you. And it just means as well, for in the position of, say, like faculty reps or something, that they could have their poster in the notice board in a particular faculty, as opposed to having to decide where to put it. But I'm up to hearing other ideas too.
I'm going to go to Chloe, if that's okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on this, like it wasn't a separate point, but I would just be worried because it was a similar like wording that we had last year, and there was one per notice board, but then there was also 60 per window. Like it just, like, I think if it goes into a little bit more detail to say they can only go on notice boards, not on windows, not on the back of every cubicle door, just to narrow it down, because it is thousands of pages. Like,
and then I'll move to Kate. Kate Goodman, Business Faculty Rep.
Yeah, Kate Goodman, Business Faculty Rep. I just want to say that if it is one per notice board, that we make sure there's space, because I know last year when I ran, there was, after like 10 minutes from when we could put posters up, there was no room. So if we could ensure that there is space, because I know clubs and socks already have posters up sometimes already. So if we could ensure that, that would be great.
And I will go back to Lucian now to propose an amendment. I
agree with what Kate said. There's people who print, like myself, printed A0 posters to take up loads of space. So it's kind of unfair to have one of those and then have someone with an A4 poster and to have that as like one poster per person. So I think there'd have to be a size rule put in as well if you were going to have that. But I think what Katie said in the chat there about having one per notice board to a max of 50 is also a good idea. And I also agree with what Chloe said, that if we say no posters on windows or walls, and it has to be an official notice board. So if I was going to propose an amendment, I would say a poster has to be A3 size at max, one per notice board.
Can we remove the conditional and just have this you proposing an amendment?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. So I'm going to propose an amendment that for the 2021 SU elections, candidates may have one poster on each designated notice board at a maximum of A3 printed size, with no more than 50 posters total across all campuses.
Okay, so the proposed amendment to Schedule E is that each candidate will have one poster per designated notice board, that these posters will be a maximum size of A3, and that each candidate will have a cap of 50 posters. Is that all right, Lucian? Perfect.
Yeah.
Does anyone want to speak against this amendment? Okay, I'm going to go really quickly. No, so Podge is furiously typing away to get the amendment. So you're going to vote on the amendment, and after this, I'm going to cut off the debate just for the interest of time, because we've gone way over on this. Please vote on your screen now. You're voting to accept or reject the amendment. Perfect. That amendment has carried. Excellent. I want to apologize for this taking so long, but I think it's really important that we have this discussion and nail it down, just because elections are obviously so central to the union. So we shall move on to actually voting on Schedule E itself now. So we're going to vote on Schedule E as amended. The two amendments made are the section, if you can remember, because it's so long ago, about the names part being removed, and with the poster limits. So we're voting on Schedule E itself now, whether to accept or reject Schedule
Just
E.
before I launch that, Owen, I just wanted to show everybody that, see there, that's the wording that it says the club or society cannot campaign or share campaign materials over one candidate over another, just to make sure that that's the motion. It's not the other one, not the motion, but that's
cool.
The wording.
Perfect. If everyone's happy, I am going to, or Podge is going to launch the poll now. You're voting to accept or reject Schedule E as amended. Now, that has been accepted. Perfect. Lovely, Herlin. We shall move on to the first of Dean's items for agreement, which I can't remember which one it is, but it says on the agenda. So, Dean, you know, over to you.
Yes, so this is a item that was mandated of me in last semester. So I would have established a Black Students and Students of Color advisory group, and within that motion, I was mandated to present a terms of reference for that group, which detailed how exactly it worked and how it was governed and all those different things. The terms of reference is a pretty long document, and I'm aware that we have been here for an hour already, and for much of that I have been speaking. So unless someone wants me to go through a particular section, and if people are okay, I think we would, assuming people have read it, we would be okay with kind of me giving a small summary of what it talks about and then voting on it, unless anyone has issues.
I am more than okay with that. I'm going to assume that everyone's read it because it was sent out already.
Cool. So just as like a very shorthand version of what the terms of reference says, it says that there will be a Black Students and Students of Color advisory group, and that it will have representation from the Students' Union executive on it. So one vice president is on it. It will have at least 5 students and at max 9 students, and that those students should be Black students or students of color, and that there will be a chairperson of that group elected at the end of each academic year within the group, that isn't the sabbatical officer that would look after stuff like setting the agenda of what the group talks about each week. That's a pretty shorthand version of what the terms of reference says.
Perfect. Has anyone any questions, queries, complaints about the terms of reference presented? No. Wonderful. We shall move to a vote to accept the terms of reference of the Black Students and Students of Colour Advisory Group. Rolls off the tongue. Perfect. They have been accepted. Thank you very much, Dean. And Dean, it's you again. Off you go.
Yes, so the second one is on the Students with Disabilities Advisory Group. I don't know if, yeah, I can just speak off the cuff. So if you read the motion as it was sent in, essentially similar to the Black Students and Students of Colour Advisory Group, I think it's really important that students with disabilities have an avenue to have direct communication with the sabbatical team and to also feed into the work of the Students' Union. There's no point of people who don't have that lived experience deciding what is and what is not important for students with disabilities. So essentially, this motion mandates myself to set up this group, although it already does exist, and to provide a terms of reference for that at next CRC in the same way that would have been done for the Black Students and Students of Colour Advisory Group.
Perfect. Thank you, Dean. Has anyone any questions, queries about this item? Wonderful. So we shall move to a vote on the motion itself. Please vote now. Wonderful. That motion has passed. Excellent news, and we shall see you at CRC2 to present the terms of reference. We shall move on to items for information. Sean Smith, if you can raise your hand, please, so I can unmute you. Where are you? If Sean's not here, that'll be really awkward. Sean is not here. Oh, Sean is here. The fodder. There you go. My apologies, Sean Smith.
Hello, I am here, don't worry. Hello everyone. I have a presentation, and if
Dylan is working furiously
being shared,
to
that's
get that
perfect.
presentation
No
up.
worries. While that's being shared, I'll just introduce. So my name's Sean Smith, as you can see on my name, but St. Pat's campus, which is now my living room, but we kind of moved from there. Last year I was on the SU executive, I was education faculty rep, and then in the last few months of that position, I was asked to join part of a research team. And the title, you guessed it, is Moving Large Face-to-Face Classes Online. So it's one of the DCU COVID-19 research projects, and why I'm presenting it today is because more than likely in the coming weeks and before the end of the semester, you're going to be meeting with program boards, program chairs, module coordinators, and this is, I suppose, it kind of links to what Fergus said at the start. It's research-based evidence from the first stage of the pandemic that was kind of back up any points you want to make. The research is in its final stages. There'll be a report published hopefully by CRC 2 or 3, but I'll go through kind of what we have now that can be really helpful. So Dean, if you can move on to the next slide. Thank you. So the research team itself is, I'm just sharing this because it is important, it's representative of everyone that's involved in learning at DCU. So there's 2 lecturers, Anne-Marie and Karen. There's myself, obviously, with my stunning headshot that's putting everyone else to shame. And then there is Rob, Suzanne and Mark, and they're in the learning technologists, and they're in the teaching enhancement unit. Staff will know them, and they're kind of key in the provision of online learning in DCU. So the research is good by them. Next slide, please. Dylan, thank you. Why, I suppose I'm going through the methodology. I'm not going to spend time on it because we've been here for far too long at this stage, but we've done a literature review and then analysis of data that kind of was to do with staff and what supports they accessed. But the most important was a survey of staff and students in large classes. So you may have seen me on the SU Instagram story last June, I think, at this stage, begging for people to take part in my survey. So thank you to anyone who did. But the survey itself was representative of DCU. It had all faculties involved, and it told a lot. And what led to that was the next slide. There's a guidance document, and Dylan, if you can click into the hyperlink there, that would be great. So this is a guidance document, and this is what I want to share with you today. It's an interim document, so obviously, like I said, we don't have the final report yet, but it should be hopefully in the next month or 2. But this was published last September in advance of semester 1, so it really helped a lot of large classes move online last semester, and I know myself, just from my own experience, I could tell that staff and the IOE had looked at this because a lot of the feedback was taken on board. So I'm not going to go through all of it. Like I said, it's been a long CRC, but the first page there, just an introduction. The second page is a curriculum page. It's primarily for lecturers and stuff, so not going to spend too long on it, but the hyperlinks, there's hyperlinks on the page and they will link you directly to resources that staff can use or that you can consult before you actually make a proposal for something to change. It can be really useful. Next page is to do with teaching. Just a few points there, and you can watch this back on YouTube if you're bringing this forward anywhere. But the loop book reference to that's really useful. It's great for organizing module pages and bring it forward to staff. I know myself, it's really useful. VVox polling app, I don't know if anyone's used that, but it is quite interactive. Loop announcement forums and recording of lectures. That's an important one to put in there. If staff aren't really recording lectures, you do have that research-based evidence that it does help. It's in all the literature, it's in all of the student surveys. It's very useful. Next page is to do with learning, different things like loop glossary and loop, I can't see the thing, it's another loop thing. They are very useful. And it's something that you can bring forward, and there's hyperlinks there, staff, and go and look at it. It's all kind of there for you. And then finally, assessment, that's to do with exams and just moving online. Different things like sharing assessment criteria. If that's not being shared with you, you have research-based evidence to ask, to get lecturers to share with you. And then avoiding proctored exams, which are kind of exams where like they're very American, kind of where your camera's watching you all the time. And then alternative assessments, there's a hyperlink there. Encourage you to click all into it. You don't have to do it now, but if you are thinking about proposing a change to an assignment, there's a list of like 20 there that can be useful. And so that's really all. Thank you for listening. If there's any questions at all, pop them in the chat, or Owen, you're the chair, you can.
Thanks, John. I will send this presentation out to everyone after council. Just it was sent in to me late, so blame Sean.
What I'll do is, Owen, sorry, I'll put the link to the guidance document in the chat, so if people want to consult it or bookmark it, please do.
Perfect. And if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand now, or else, Sean, would you be comfortable with them emailing about it?
Yeah,
or
perfect.
Cool.
That's great.
Perfect. Sean will put his email in the chat as well. And then we move on again, once more, at last, to Dean, once more. Dean, floor is yours.
Hi again. I'll like mandate myself to never speak again for the rest of the year after this CRC, I promise. Yeah, so I'm just giving you all an update on the upcoming campaign weeks from the Students' Union sort of sabbatical team. So next week, as Fergal said, we have Wellbeing Week, and there's a bunch of stuff that's going to be going on in there, focusing on physical health and mental health as well. So some of the things that we're going to be doing, I'll be hosting some drop-in hours for particular students throughout the week. So if a student needs to come and talk to me about something that they're dealing with, or maybe they just need to vent, or maybe they need someone to talk to, whatever it is, that they can do that. Of course, you can do that at any stage throughout the year, but I'm going to dedicate some hours as well during the week. We'll be sharing some stuff on socials around accessing the counselling service and things like that. What also going to have a really exciting giveaway during the week, where we'll be potentially giving away a pretty large sum of money to students. So I can't share the exact details of it yet, but you will see it during the week of during Wellbeing Week next week, and I promise it is actually quite exciting. And then, as Fergal mentioned at the top of CRC, if any of you can remember way back then, we do have the student feedback form that will be going out. So I actually cannot stress enough how important it is that we get responses on this feedback form. As much as the sabbatical team, we can talk to the university and talk to upper management and say, hey, these are the experiences that students are having. Unless we have concrete data to back up that conversation, we're limited in our lobbying power on that. So, you know, we're kind of looking at a need to get around 1,000, if not more, people to give responses to the survey. So if you can all help in getting responses on that, it would be very helpful. And as Fergal mentioned, there's going to be like 8 people or 8 Just Eat vouchers given away. I think it's like €25 or something. So it only takes about 5 minutes to fill it out. You will receive it in our weekly newsletter this week, and we'll be promoting it heavily during Wellbeing Week next week as well. And then I just want to highlight as well that In week 4 of semester 2, we'll be having Shag Week, so that's Sexual Health and Guidance Week, and I'm really looking forward to Shag Week. We actually have very fun events planned for that, some giveaways, some sex quizzes, some stuff around the different sexual health services you can access. It's probably the campaign week I've been looking forward to the most during this year. So that's week 4 of semester 2. And then in week 6 of semester 2, so that's the week after reading week, there's Rainbow Week / Pride Week that I've been organizing alongside the LGBT Society. And so that's just to keep in mind for all of you. That week 2, so that's next week, Wellbeing Week, week 4, Shag Week, week 6, Rainbow / Pride Week. And that's me done. I will never speak again, I promise.
Thank you very much, Dean. And that is all for items for information. We shall move back to Katie Archer, BAJH 3, for her item of ALB. Katie, I'm going to ask you to unmute now.
Yeah, thanks. This was actually brought up like in a society group chat, so it was all from students from different faculties and stuff. But people were just saying that they really wanted more access to the library, and I know it said it was probably going to try and open soon. But if it was possible to extend the booking hours, I don't know if people were able to stay in for longer than the 3-hour slots, or if people were able to kind of browse the shelves a little bit more. I think those were the two things that people were asking about.
Thank you, Katie. Lucian's hand went up first. Sorry, Chloe.
Hi, thanks, Katie. Yeah, the library has been a source of frustration for me all year, but I have talked to the library management a few times and also to DC management last week, so I'll try and give a quick overview of kind of reasons for things. The issue with browsing is that they don't want people touching the books because of the old coronavirus. So they're like, don't be touching the books because then we'll have to quarantine the books for 3 days. Now, I also have walked into many a bookshop this year and gone around sticking my filthy hands on books, and no one has said a thing about it. But it does seem that university libraries have a different attitude, a different approach, different policy, probably for the best. And I know that we're not the only college that has been difficult about browsing. It's unfortunate. I mean, it creates in my opinion, completely different relationship with how you approach knowledge when you're learning if you can't go around and browse books. But it's just one of those things that we have to deal with this year. I don't really think they're going to change that until DCU is out of kind of COVID panic state in a few months, or probably like, late summer or whatever. I think that the browsing books isn't going to come back anytime soon, unfortunately. In terms of actually using the library, yeah, I agree. I think the library should be open right now, in my opinion. I think the library should be open later and longer hours during the semester as well. But there's a number of issues, one of which is that staff are in sort of shift bubbles in order to avoid overlap. I mean, we've seen this ourselves with the sabbatical team in terms of how workplaces are being handled during the pandemic. And it is a real thing where, some people just can only work certain hours and days because they don't want to overlap between people because of cross-contamination. So that's an issue with the library. There's also just something that the university said to me last Friday when I asked, can we please get the library back open really soon? They were like, we're not actually aware of the whole a litany of students who need the facilities, and that a lot of people aren't showing up when they book their study slots, which is unfortunate. And I don't like the approach of putting the blame back on the students, but it is true that a lot of students weren't showing up for their study slots. And also the last week or so, the university are, as far as they're concerned, haven't heard of a whole lot of people that want to actually go into the library. Now, I have only really heard from about 2 people who do. So I'm aware there are other people out there, but they're going to have to make that heard, because the university say to me, who wants to use the library? And I'm like, this person and this person. And they'd like to see more, I think, concrete evidence that people are like desperate for those facilities. So if you have any reason why you cannot study at home and you need to use the library, just do send me an email, because I will collate some information on that. But obviously, we too do want to respect things like the 5K travel restrictions. But if you're, in a situation where you have to study and you have to study in the library, that's completely understandable. Do email me, because there are alternative arrangements that we can sort out in some cases if you need to study on campus or whatnot. So please reach out to me and tell your classmates to reach out to me if you need spaces to study, because I would love to hear from people. So I hope the library is going to be back open in a few weeks. I'm going to ask them repeatedly, can you hurry up? and reopen it once it looks like it's safe to do that. But obviously, we also do want to respect the safety of the staff and of the issues with staff rostering and those things. So I think that, yeah, the library is a facility that should be included when you're paying your fees. I mean, I'm really frustrated that it's closed. So that's all I can say.
Perfect. Thanks, Lucian. I'll move to Chloe.
Yes, I really did not want to go before Lucian. I didn't have all those answers, but I just wanted to add on to his point. So this is a perfect example of the kind of issue we had last semester when we raised an issue to the university that we knew was a service that the students should be able to avail of, and they would say, oh, we only know of 3 people that want it. So this is exactly why we need the survey filled out for this kind of thing. And all last semester, Lucian was trying to get more library times and them open longer hours. Like he was literally breaking his own heart because they would just keep saying, oh, but nobody needs it or wants it. So yeah, please fill out the survey, even if it's smaller things you can think of that are a similar irritation for trying to study online or just this whole year. Thanks.
Thank you, Chloe. And Fergal, I imagine, will have a somewhat similar message, but
Yeah, I just wanted to plug the feedback survey again, just feedback form, just because, again, we need to get all these issues in one place, organized nicely, and this needs to be presented when if there's any of the rest of the Sphatic officers or myself on my weekly meetings at upper management. We need this data. We know there's a problem. We just want to be able to show it. So yeah, just to plug that survey when it goes around again.
perfect. Thanks, Fergal. And Katie, is that all okay with you?
Yeah, that's perfect. And just on the, like, I think people might have been, when they weren't showing up for, whenever I tried to book, it was like booked out for like a couple of weeks or 3 weeks in advance. And I don't know, maybe to prevent people not showing up, you could suggest the library, limit the time you can book from. So like you can only book for this week or something. Because I definitely found it super hard to book a slot whenever I tried.
Yeah. Something that was suggested by Kate, the business rep, yesterday, was that they maybe only let you book maybe 72 hours or 48 hours in advance, which I think is a really excellent idea. So I'll suggest that to Orla from the library as soon as they hopefully reopen.
Perfect. So fill out the feedback form. Don't break Lucian's heart, basically. Right. I think that is everything. Thank you very much, everyone, for your contributions to another successful CRC. Our next one is on the 15th of February. So, Jesus Christ, that is a thing. So 15th February is our next CRC. Wow, I can't look at that.
I waited until you were in the middle of speaking to.
I noticed that as well.
I went through the extra effort to making an animation that would fade in slowly. So there you go. There's no need to.
Someone has a question about the feedback form. It's for all students, yeah. Connected on campus, all faculties, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, cool. Perfect. There is no need to be upset. 15th of February, I know you have to go without us for a while, but now we have a bit of time between CRCs. So best of luck at the start of the semester. Any questions, queries, complaints about CRC, come to me. Any questions, queries, complaints about anything else, go to the Sabats, basically. That's all from me. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll chat to you soon.
Thanks very much, Owen. Thanks, everyone. See you.
Thanks, guys.
Good luck.